the way the hour had to go, but it is the Heisman Trophy ceremony tomorrow. Jayden Daniels, Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, and Marvin Harrison Jr., the 4 finalists. Garrett, I'm very proud of for having some journalistic objectivity on this, in that, Jayden Daniels is clearly his favorite player this year because he's LSU's quarterback, but you feel that Michael Penix Jr., because he's got 4 more wins at this point in a conference title, he's your pick. Although, to me, this is where you kind of get into the splitting hairs of best overall player. Who is that and what does that really mean? Because Jayden Daniels, just the last game. Here's his last game stats: 235 yards passing, 4 total touchdowns, no interceptions, 120 rushing yards. That's a Heisman Trophy day.
It is. Yeah. It is. I just feel like there's so many similarities between what Daniels brought to LSU and what Penix brought to Washington. They both have elite receivers. Penix, obviously, the rushing attack for both have been kind of hit and miss. Both quarterbacks have kind of carried the load rushing-wise, but Penix he's been on the biggest stage more times than Daniels has been this year. He's been able to win against another Heisman contender twice this year. I think there's so many similarities between the two, but when you get down to it, I think what Penix has...
And the defending Heisman Trophy winner.
So, I think that kind of plays into it. Now, you could have made the argument in years past, obviously the SEC is the strongest conference, yada, yada. There's no denying that the Pac-12 has been the strongest conference top to bottom this year, and Penix has navigated that unscathed. So, to me, I think he's the guy.
Yeah, I agree. I'd vote for Penix. Jayden Daniels, a lot of respect for his game and the numbers that he put up and the season that LSU had. But when you put it like Garrett put it, I don't really know how it's so one-sided right now. I really don't get it. I don't get why he's such the huge favorite. Terrific player, terrific year. I'm not going to bemoan his win tomorrow night, which looks like it's going to happen. I won't be, one of those people that come Monday and be like, Michael Penix got screwed and Jayden Daniels is a bum. And no, I don't think that at all. I just think it's a really weird year for the Heisman where there's just, I don't know, it's just strange. There's not a lot of build-up for it. It's just kind of weird how Daniels was sort of crowned, given the argument that Garrett just made about the fact there's a guy on an undefeated team doing the exact same thing, basically, in bigger games against better teams overall. And it's just like, yeah, but Jayden Daniels, I don't know. It's weird. I'm not quite sure why it's so weird to me, but it's just weird. And I do feel like Michael Penix in another year would be like the odds-on favorite going into tomorrow night, but he's not. Jayden Daniels is. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the final vote breakdown looks like, or maybe there's a surprise in store. I don't know, but I wonder if there's the SEC influence or what. And also take into account that Jayden Daniels did a lot of stat padding, like a lot of stat padding.
Especially the last part of the season.
Yeah, like the final stretch run, he was there in games he had no business still being in, and he's just throwing it around and running around and putting up numbers because he had to make his case, whereas Michael Penix, for example, is just playing in big games and putting up numbers, and he had like a little bit of a lull, and it's like people, like he had like a lull of like a couple of games, and people were like, all right, he's done, move over, and he went from favorite to like non-favorite in the span of a couple weeks maybe, and I'm not quite sure why, because they never lost a game.
Yeah.
So it's just
that's not really that important a metric anymore, Craig.
I think it was the Oregon hype. I think the Oregon hype kind of diluted that.
Yeah. I mean, it had to be because it was just he was the guy, and then all of a sudden he wasn't, and it was like Washington kind of struggled a little bit, and then Oregon came on so hot and heavy, and there was a whole conversation about, well, they're still better than Washington, even though they lost that game. And I know I picked him to win the second game. Well, he went and beat him again. And he was a big part of beating them again. So I don't get it. I don't get why he was just sort of shoved to the side so quickly. And Jayden Daniels has just sort of crowned the winner here in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it's been. It's weird. And I'm very curious to see what that final vote looks like. And I would love to be, happily surprised. And they're like, Michael Penix, because I think he'd be absolutely deserving of it. And Again, it's kind of like the playoff argument. This isn't against Alabama. This isn't against Jayden Daniels. It's anti-SEC. It's just like it was anti the decision of the committee. I'm just anti sort of the way that narrative flipped and why it's not being argued a little bit more of why did this guy go from clear-cut resume favorite to this guy padded a bunch of stats and whatnot, and now he's the, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I will say, like, the last game against A&M, if they don't have Jayden, like, that's the other thing.
I'm not.
Yeah, but, like, it's true. But, like, but he had a game, they played Georgia State the week before. So Washington had their hardest games all down the stretch. So, yeah, no, I agree with you guys. Like, I don't think you're wrong either way to get, like, Jayden Daniels is certainly Heisman caliber. And if, Michael Penix didn't exist, then there really isn't an argument. Like, it's one of those deals. So,
and I think Jayden Daniels, too, you got the dual threat aspect that you don't really have with Michael Penix. I mean, when you're sitting there rushing for 200-plus yards and you're throwing for 200, 300-plus yards and you're doing that all in the same game and you got a handful of touchdowns in, like, multiple weeks. And, I mean, that eventually does add up, and I could see where that tilts you in a way because it wasn't just Georgia State. It was against Florida, for example, or it's against Texas A&M, and there is more eyeballs on games like that. So, he was, like I said, it's not an anti-Jayden Daniels thing. It's just in most years, you would think the undefeated quarterback who's put up huge numbers would be the favorite to win the Heisman, and for some reason, Jayden Daniels is just clearly the guy, despite having 3 losses on the resume, and that's fine. He's very deserving.
Well, I think a lot of that too is when you look the push out of LSU, the LSU camp and the SEC camp in general, right, was putting up Jayden Daniels' numbers compared to what Joe Burrow did. Hit the in 2019 with the Heisman. They're very comparable, so that's where a lot of that comes from. But at the end of the day, man, Penix, he's the dude to me.
Yeah, but doing that's fair. But doing that's also like, well, Alabama should be in because the SEC's won 17 of the last 20. Like we saw that argument. It's like that doesn't have anything to do with anything in regards to the playoffs this year. Nothing from not this year matters in the playoffs, like or it shouldn't. So that's like, yeah, well, Joe Burrow did it, and he's close to Joe Burrow. Well, that was an entirely different year. Mm-hmm. And guess what? LSU's not playing for a national title.
Nope.
So it's not the same thing, but you're right. Pumping that up and showing those numbers in that way and having the PR push, I think definitely helped Jayden Daniels in that last month. And again, he was incredible, not taking anything away from him. He'll be a worthy winner, but I'm just very confused by the fact that Michael Penix is not more of a clear-cut favorite for it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, when we come back,